edition of Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mideles, and I am your host here in the Harlingen, Texas, in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. A little later in the program, our Sandra Sanchez, South Texas correspondent for Border Report Live, is going to be talking with Mr. Jim Chapman, a board member of the group known as Save RGV, to talk about environmental concerns as new pieces of border wall go up down here in the Rio Grande Valley. But first, let's take a look at some of the things making headlines across the border, starting with attorneys for Kilmar Abrego Garcia say he wants to now seek asylum in the United States. His lawyers told that to a federal judge recently. Now, the 30-year-old Salvadoran national was detained Monday in Baltimore by U.S. Customs and Immigration Enforcement after leaving a Tennessee jail on Friday. Administration officials have said he's part of the dangerous MS-13 gang, an allegation that Garcia's lawyers deny. His lawyers are fighting the deportation efforts in court, arguing he has the right to express fear of persecution and torture in Uganda, where they want to send him, a country he has no ties with. Also happening, immigration and customs enforcement deportation flights have reached record highs, according to our partners at The Hill. And now the airlines running the trips have taken steps to make it more difficult to track the planes being used to carry shackled people across the country and around the world. That's according to independent groups monitoring the flights. In recent months, ICE air contractors started using dummy call signs for the planes in the air and are hiding their tail numbers so they can't be located on public tracking websites. Once on the ground, the planes are parked behind buildings so the migrants can't be seen arriving or boarding. Still, migrant rights groups have created ways to follow ICE flights using shared information and crowdsourced data from radio signals. Also happening in Florida, a top Florida official, it says that the controversial ICE detention facility in the Everglades will likely be empty in just a matter of a few days. Now, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis' administration is fighting a federal judge's order to close down the facility that the Trump administration has dubbed the Alligator Alcatraz by late October. That's according to an email exchange shared with the Associated Press. The facility was built 2 months ago with the goal of holding up to 3,000 detainees as part of President Donald Trump's push to deport people who are in the U.S. illegally. At one point, it held almost 1,000 people, but late last week, there were only 300 being held. So we'll keep an eye on that for you as well. Time now to bring in our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez, with her very special guest, Mr. Jim Chapman.
Hi, Rudy. It's great to be here. And Jim Chapman is with the nonprofit group Save RGV. Thanks for being with us, Jim.
Well, thank you, Sandra. I'm glad to be here.
Jim and I have walked around the border areas, the border wall, through environmental fields for years together. And so it's great to see you and to have you on this show. What brought us to talk to you today was because the Trump administration this week announced that it's waiving dozens of environmental regulations and public health laws in order to build more border wall in parts of rural Starr County as well as Hidalgo County, something that they have done before and they're doing it again. Jim, particularly, you have worked with wildlife and preservation, and part of this is going to affect the lower Rio Grande Valley National Wildlife Refugee Tract. So what is your thoughts about hearing this? And there's a map showing some of the areas where they're waiving these regulations.
Well, it's a couple of thoughts. Well, first of all, for people that don't know, the lower Rio Grande Valley National Wildlife Refuge is actually a string of refuge tracts, mostly along the Rio Grande from Falcon Dam all the way to Boca Chica. And it's an effort that began in 1979 to really recreate a corridor of brush and forest for wildlife and for the plants that the valley is blessed with, so that 10 years, 50 years, 100 years from now, they will still be here. They will still be part of what makes the valley so special. The recent waiver is not new. I mean, this has been going on intermittently now for quite some time. They are targeting the wildlife refuge tracts, not because those are particularly known to be heavy traffic areas, but simply because they are federal property and they don't have to go through condemnation and all the legal proceedings that they have to go through when they take private land. But it is very, very damaging to wildlife refuges to have essentially an impassable wall, either slicing right through the middle of the refuge tract or cutting it off from the river. I mean, the river really is the source of life for a lot of the wildlife along the river. And so when you put a wall right through it, if wildlife on one side, they can't pass to the other. And for things like the Texas tortoise, Texas horned lizard, which are protected species, they can't, they can't pass. They can't escape. Every 10 or 12 years, the river goes into a flood, and water comes up to the levee along the river, and anything that can't get out essentially is either swept downstream or drowns. And so it's really, Save RGV feels like it's really a betrayal of a promise that was made to preserve the plants and wildlife along the river.
I wanted to unpack some of what you said because these are separate tracts throughout, formed in 1979. Some are longer tracts and some are small. I know that there are some signs there, but you kind of really need to know where to look to find these tracts. Again, for somebody who's watching or listening who may not be from Texas, a lot of the land here on the border is private, and so they have to get permission to build the border wall. But if they already own the federal tract, as you mentioned, then they can waive these rules and build. This is the 7th waiver that Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has issued since she took office. I do want to offer some of DHS perspective. They said that they're going to build 5 miles of 30-foot tall border wall in Starr and Hidalgo counties. It's part of existing wall. It was funded through the fiscal year 2019 appropriations. And the agency says it's necessary because, quote, to ensure the expeditious construction of physical barriers and roads, projects executed under a waiver are critical steps to secure the southern border and reinforce our commitment to border security. But you were talking about some of the species that could be affected. I know ocelots, you mentioned tortoise. There are some endangered plants also in this area. I think the Zapata bladderbod, is that correct?
Yeah, there are, at least 6 or 7 endangered plants. And remember, when they put a wall, it's not just a wall, but it's a 300-foot wide swath. So there actually is a lot of habitat that is destroyed in addition to putting up a wall. When the border wall efforts, first started, quite a few years ago, there was at least some attempt to acknowledge the needs of wildlife. I mean, it was small, it was minimal, but it was something. They actually put little, what they called wildlife passages in the border wall. I mean, these were very small, and they would allow at least small animals to get through. But these walls that are going
during the first Trump administration or prior?
This was prior. Yeah,
okay.
I think this was actually prior to that. And but now the current Trump version of the border wall has none of that. And so
they've announced that they're also going to paint all new border wall black, which actually the new section north of Roma, Texas, in far western Starr County is already painted black. And Kristi Noem says that's to prevent migrants from climbing because it'll make it hotter, right? And we know we have triple-digit days for dozens of days in a row down here. What can that do to wildlife, something black and hot like that?
Well, I don't know if that will really affect wildlife because I don't think there are animals that, that are able or even try to get over the wall. and there's no passage through the wall. So, I think whether it's black, yellow, or red, I'm not sure. For wildlife, it's equally bad. Sandra, I would like to just add one kind of curious thing, and that is that the map showing where these wall segments are going up, some of those segments are already walled. Were walled during Trump's first administration. So it's a little bit odd that they're issuing waivers for some sections of wall that are already built.
Which areas? To the west or to the east?
A couple of the ones in Starr County are already walled off, and yet they are shown on the map as areas that laws are being waived so that walls can be built there. So, whether this is just oversight or incompetence or whatever, but some of those segments, the wall's already there.
Is that near the Arroyo Ramirez? Because I knew there were 2 wildlife tracks that had already been walled off under wall that was built during the first Trump administration, and that was to the concern of many environmentalists in the area.
Yeah, I think I don't have the list of refuge tracks in front of me, but I know Las Ruinas in Starr County, I believe, is one that is already walled off, but is shown on the recent map that it's going to be walled off.
And the maps that DHS have issued historically have been kind of hard to figure out, as journalists, as people who live on the border. So this kind of falls in line to what we have been seeing for years and years. And that's in all administrations. It's kind of been like that.
Yeah, and actually, Jim, if you can stay with us for just a moment, we're going to take a quick break because we'd like to unpack that a little bit. For those of you at home watching, stay with us. Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. Back to Border Report Live. My name is Rudy Mireles here in Harlingen, Texas. And now back to that conversation with Sandra Sanchez and Jim Chapman of Save RGV.
Yeah, we were talking about some of the segments that are listed on the map actually are areas that have already been walled off. The intention of the Trump administration is to connect some of these wall segments because, again, for somebody watching somewhere else, they may not realize that these sections are not connected. They're started in different areas. Many of them do not connect, but ultimately to link them is part of it, and that would involve going through some of these federal wildlife tracks, right?
Yes. Yeah. Those are the low-hanging fruit. So they essentially are oftentimes the first to get walled off.
There have been some exceptions. In Hidalgo County, Santa Ana Wildlife Refuge was an area that there had been huge concern when the first Trump administration about it being walled off. It actually was waived under Congress. They wrote it in that the wall will not be built there. So there are some ways to protect some of these areas, historic cemeteries, some historic chapels, Santa Ana, as I mentioned. But these other tracks, you were describing them. They're separated. Some are bigger, some are smaller areas of land. They're areas where they're just kind of set-asides where there's no other construction going on. Describe it a little bit for people. I mean, can you walk through it? Are there trails there?
Well, of course, I have not walked all the tracks, but many of them, there are some that are open to the public. But the majority, due to the lack of staff and also the complete lack of infrastructure and so forth, are not open to the public. But particularly the ones in Starr County, I mean, there is really a lot of wonderful natural area habitat that has been largely untouched. Of course, much of it is private. There are some some wildlife tracks as well, but you have sandstone cliffs overlooking the river. You have giant oyster fossil beds, and evidence of past Native American living in terms, arrowheads and other things. So it's really that plus the really fascinating plant communities there. There are quite a few state and federal listed species of endangered and threatened plants, and it's if you can get out there, and of course with border walls, that's going to make it much more difficult, in some cases impossible. It really is a wonderful area in terms of natural resources, and I'm so thankful that that some of that is under permanent protection, and it doubly hurts to see big swaths of those lands being cleared and an impassable wall put up in the middle of those swaths.
You mentioned earlier that apprehensions, arrests by Customs and Border Protection, the numbers are down. Actually, it's fewer than 1,000 monthly apprehensions on average in the Rio Grande Valley sector. That's an area of 34,000 square miles. Yeah. Well, so does it make sense to put more wall up?
Well, excuse me. One of the primary justification when they've done the waivers before, they usually, as part of the rationale, they have listed the amount of illegal traffic, people, the number of people apprehended in the past year. Well, what they've done this time is they're using data from 2021 to 2025 and showing big numbers because 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was a lot of traffic. If they used the traffic for just the past year, the numbers would be much smaller because the traffic dropped substantially during President Biden's last year when the asylum process was tightened up, and of course it has dropped even further under the Trump administration. So it's the rationale for needing something this drastic, the rationale is essentially gone, but that doesn't seem to be slowing down this rush to construct these impassable walls.
Some of the video we're playing now shows some of the wildlife area as well as some new border wall that's built in Roma, which is Starr County. I wanted to read a quote from the Center for Biological Diversity, and just this is some previous footage I took. This is actually Jim. This is you standing in front of the wall. You can see how big it is. We've been out for years tracking the wall, different stages of it. They're building, and so I just kind of put together some footage for people to see. Lake and Jordal at the Center for Biological Diversity said in a statement to Border Report this week that, quote, there's a special cruelty in walling off national wildlife refuges that were created for conservation. These lands exist to protect endangered species and connect fragmented habitat, not to be bulldozed for Trump's wall. A colleague of yours, another environmentalist in the area, Scott Nickel, who works with the group Friends of the Wildlife Corridor, and he's also gone out with us from time to time, wasn't able to join us because he's a professor and he's teaching at this time. But I have something that he said to us at the border wall not too long ago, and this is what he was talking about, what it does when you build through lands like this. Do we have that, Rudy?
When you put all this, hardware that is intended for a war zone into a place that is not a war zone, where people live and where environments are trying to hang on, you do a lot of damage.
Some of the laws that have been waived include the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. I mean, the Antiquities Act. There's like 31 laws that have been waived. Is there anything that your organization can do, or are you planning on doing anything, or are you just moving on to other causes in the area?
Well, yeah, I think the options at this point, earlier in the process, there were quite a few lawsuits challenging the border wall, and there are still a couple of of lawsuits, although I don't think those affect the lower Rio Grande Valley. But essentially, nearly all the legal avenues have been closed, and so I think the most that we can really do is try and inform the public on what is being lost, because the Trump administration's concern for the environment and our natural resources is essentially nil. But people love their public lands, and people love wildlife and the habitat that supports wildlife, and so we simply try and be one of many voices, so that what's happening is not done, behind closed doors in the black of night. We need to know, and the people need to know what we're losing.
And what are some of the other issues that Save RGV takes up here in the Rio Grande Valley?
Yeah, well, our focus has generally been on the loss of natural areas. The valley has been largely cleared, and there's various numbers. One number probably applies to Hidalgo County is that there really is only around 5% of the original native habitat that still exists, and everything else has been developed in one way or another.
And this area is a huge area for ecotourism. People come from all over the country, the world, for special migratory birds. We had a very endangered bird last winter, a couple winters ago, and people were just hopping flights from London to get here to try to see it. Right?
Yeah. If you know somebody who's a serious birder, no matter where they live, this is one of the places they will come. When Roger Torrey Peterson, the famed author of the birding guides, when he wanted to set a one-day record for the most species of birds seen, the valley is where he came to do it. So it is a tremendous resource, in things like the border wall damages that resource, and really damages our natural heritage. And it's we need to have our eyes open as to what's happening.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Mr. Chapman. We've been speaking with Mr. Jim Chapman, board member for a group known as Save RGV, a group that focuses on environmental issues here in Deep South Texas. We appreciate your time today, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
All righty. And stay with us, because Border Report Live is back in 1 minute. My name is Rudy Mireles, and I'm your host here in Harlingen, Texas, in the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas. Very interesting conversation that Sandra just had with Save RGV board member Jim Chapman. If you know anything about the Rio Grande Valley and the environment, you know that name Jim Chapman comes up very often. He's and we know they've fought and been vocal about what's happening out at Boca Chica with SpaceX, and now this. Something interesting that he did mention, and I just wanted to kind of editorialize on it for a moment, is all the ecotourism that's happening across the valley. We've known about the valley being the hot spot for birders year in and year out. Winter Texans, some of them become winter Texans just because they are massive bird watching fans. And so what's interesting is in places like Cameron County, that's Texas's southernmost county down there. It's right across the border from Tamaulipas, Matamoros, Brownsville, those areas that you hear us talking about on Border Report all so often. What's interesting is Cameron County is actually banking on ecotourism for the future. They've built and invested in hundreds of thousands of dollars in a trail system that connects the whole Cameron County loop, if you will, all the way to an ecotourism site out by South Padre Island in the Laguna Madre region. So it's very interesting to hear statistics like only 5% of Hidalgo County, for example, are undeveloped, and really what we have always been able to see, a kind of a peek into the past, if you will, if you get to one of those parts. But that is what is going on. Before we leave, we did want to tell you about our partners at Political Power Ranker. It's a weekly show tracking the movers, shakers, and rule makers in American politics. This week's episode had a lot to do with Ohio, which, as you know, in every election is a big, big deal. So make sure to check out Political Power Ranker at abc27.com or check your local Nexstar station's website. Well, that is going to do it for us today. A big thank you to Mr. Jim Chapman once again and our South Texas correspondent, Sandra Sanchez. My name is Rudy Mideles. Have a great day.